All right, we traveled a long way to get here. Actually feels like a long way. We are at OTT'S Exotic Plants, where they have great houseplants, citrus plants, violets and orchids, unique ferns, cactus and succulents, and foliage plants. This is OTT'S. Kind of reminds me a little of the Tioga Garden Center that we went to. But we're on our way to Philadelphia, and this happened to be along the way. And we've been enjoying some of the architecture as well. You can see some of the stonework on the side of these farm homes look really cool.
Time to film it all.
Time to film. This episode is brought to you by Green Chef, a CCOF certified organic company with dishes for a wide range of lifestyles, including vegan, vegetarian, paleo, and keto. All right, we got our Green Chef box in today, and it's kind of morning. I usually don't cook these in the morning, but I think I'm gonna go for this Korean-style fried rice with kimchi. Okay, so the last time I made a dish like this, I forgot the eggs. So I won't forget the eggs this time. Green Chef has a wide variety of organic produce and even offsets 100% of their carbon emissions and plastic packaging. I worked at a grocery store for quite some time, and you could tell whether something is organic by whether it starts with the number 9. So typically just a regular bell pepper is 4065, but organic would be 9 in front of that number. After a long day of working, I could sometimes get into a recipe rut, and I'm frankly too tired to go to a restaurant. So these boxes are a real treat because they are super straightforward, the recipes are easy to follow with pretty photos, and definitely give us some delicious dish options that are delivered right to the doorstep. That's a total bonus when I'm out on the new Homestead too, because there's not much else around. So go to greenchef.com/summerrain130 to get $130 off, plus free shipping on your first box. Yeah, so I wish we had a little bit of the history of OTT'S, because it seems like one of those things that has been here for a long time. I mean, look at this cissus. This is huge. These are things that would be really challenging to grow in the house. I see some mealybugs, but I think that when you have like sucking insects like that, it probably doesn't matter because they're getting good humidity. Oh, is that a cat? Hello. He's probably trying to find his cat box here. Some of these specimens like this, look at this ball of rabbit's foot fern. And all these little new fiddleheads coming up. That's pretty cool. I mean, I can't even fathom how much that would weigh. That's crazy. So any one of these, if you actually wanted to take a cutting, you could see this one right here. You could just take a piece of the root, just like this, snip it, and then plant that. And I mean, think about how many different cuttings you could get from this one plant. It's just like one of those things that keeps on giving. I mean, this looks like a cycad to me. Some kind of cycas. And then this is probably a Nephrolepis Boston fern. I mean, coming in here and just seeing all of those little aerial roots. And I mean, the Platycerium, like, come on. This is crazy. It's so easy to get distracted by the bigger specimens here. This one's falling off. So it might need to be like taken off and put up elsewhere. But also here, you can see another one. I'm also noticing that like with the greenhouses, they have this covered, because if you have too much of that UV radiation coming in, it could actually really damage the plant. So it's like just a certain amount of UV radiation that needs to come in order to be able to keep the plant healthy. But if you put too much sunlight coming through, it could actually damage the chlorophyll of the plants, and then they could actually start to brown up. And then you see the Tillandsias, Uisnoides. They seem to be doing extremely well. Very happy. This is exquisite. Now, typically we look at Platycerium bifurcatums, but I don't think that this is a different type of Platycerium. Just the structure of it looks completely different. So if anybody's Platycerium aficionados and know what species this is, please call it out. And then you have your Ficus lyrata. It's like, this just goes to show you that your greenhouse will never be tall enough, because unless you actually keep on cutting your ficus down. Spathiphyllum, and you can see the pollen grains coming off right there. This one's new. Alocasia cucullata. This cordate shaped leaf. It has this real strong venation here, and then you could see this, these side veins right here. But look at this. This kind of venation is pretty neat. They must do a kind of chalky spray over the top of their plants, which is what you're probably seeing here, unless there's like salt in the water or whatnot, and it leaves that kind of look. But this is a newer leaf, very impressive leaf, actually quite thick compared to some, certain alocasias. But I really like this venation right here. I think that's actually really striking for, a simple green plant, so to speak. Something very new. And then of course you have your Ficus elasticas right here, nice dark color. These could take a lot more light than I anticipated. I thought that because of the darkness of their leaves, that they'd be a bit better in a, kind of mid to low light condition, but mine never thrived in that kind of condition. So I think these would appreciate a little bit more light. And then the Matophyllum / philodendron. I'd like to see how, this is Philodendron Hope Salome, it still says, but there's this debate as to whether these are Thematophyllums or philodendrons. So you can see that, some of the newer leaves, they start to get much more fenestrations on their leaves as they start to mature. Let's see what else. These I absolutely love. This might be a Milky Way Aspidistra. Yeah, Aspidistra Milky Way. Not a bad price, actually. I know it seems expensive, but these are called cast iron plants, and they happen to be tough as nails. And these were very famous in the Victorian era. And also they're good plants for people, you put them in hallways and everything like that. Yeah, they don't mind to be in lower light conditions. And the regular cast iron plants have like dark green leaves, and they don't have these like speckled splotches on. But there's a lot of cool cultivars that have different kind of coloration that looks really nice. I see them more as like outdoor plants for warmer zones. Definitely warmer than this zone, which would probably be like a zone 6 or a zone 5 if you're like planting outdoors. Oh, and here's the cast iron plant with dark green leaves. Cast iron means that it's just like tough as nails, like barely hard to kill. Like a cast iron pot. Syngoniums. A lot of cultivars have become extremely popular. Let's see what kind of cultivar this is. Well, this is called they're calling this a Nephthydus, but that's a completely different genus. So Syngoniums used to be in the genus of Nephthydus, but they've moved over. Very similar leaf structure, but different plant altogether. This looks like it was a little waterfall at some point. It reminds me of, like, in many cases, like the botanic gardens. You see the syngonium kind of crawling through there? This green one? It's like a vining plant. So that's how, when I think of syngoniums, I think of them kind of growing up like little rocky enclaves like that. They typically are a vining plant, even though when you buy them, they don't look like a vining plant. And then you have your little pileas over here. And your aspleniums, your ferns over here, like here. You can see that. And then this is your papyrus. You can actually see it's in bloom right now. Nothing ever spectacular, but you know, it has you have to kind of go in and see some of the subtle effects of flowers here. So I guess this is some of the plants that they actually sell, so you can come in here and appreciate it. Here you go. This is an apicia. You can see they're called flame flowers. They're not always in bloom, but it's not hard to make them bloom. But you can see why they're called flame flowers. They have these really bright colored flowers. Sometimes you could see them in like really bright fuchsia pinks and everything along those lines. Pretty easy to propagate. Oftentimes you could see these plants like growing down rocks and like little like moss, and then this whole little area will start to propagate. So they kind of send out these, I don't know if these are considered stolons, if they are, but very similar to a spider plant where they stick out these stolons and they have little babies at the end of them. You have your Monstera adansonii. Whoa! Although you can see they have all the old names. Philodendron Swiss cheese, so obviously not a philodendron, but Monstera adansonii. Sometimes you get into plant shops and they don't really know what they have, and that can sometimes benefit you. Well, that's the garden cat. So this is a cool plant because this is almost like a Pilea peperomioides look-alike, or it could look like Peperomia polybatria, but it's actually a begonia. So this is Begonia conchifolia, ruby red, and you could tell because it has like really classic begonia flowers. I mean, this one happens to be in bloom, but if you saw this kind of peltate-shaped leaf with this little red dot on it, you could be like, ooh, is that like a cool like Pilea peperomioides or whatever? No, it's actually a begonia. But you know, the peltate-shaped leaf, you could see that across so many different types of families and genera. It's not exclusive to, you know, one genus. And typically when you have a peltate-shaped leaf, and what I mean by that is like, it's kind of this circular flat leaf, and the petiole connects like more towards the center of the leaf. So it kind of has this coin shape. So when I see this, if a leaf is like positioned that way, I could see it like a solar panel like facing up towards the sun. But of course, this might be able to even move a bit. So as the sun kind of moves across the horizon, you know, maybe the leaves slowly track the sun. So those are certain things that I kind of look at when I'm looking at the morphology of plants. Same thing here. I'm always looking at like coloration and like different leaf shape, and also how like the veins are structured. So with Photonia, this is albavians, I think it's this species name. These are pretty popular plants. They're called, I think they're called nerve plants because obviously it looks like the nerves or the veins, you know, in a human, for instance. And I often wondered about this coloration, this color pattern. You know, is it something, does it send signals to like maybe leaf mining insects where it's like, hey, don't come onto this leaf because it's already mined so heavily by a bug that gets into the leaf and you don't want to actually eat this leaf. So maybe it's a sign of protection for herbivory. Maybe that's something that they developed over time. Same thing with these Euphorbias. So when well, it says Calathea ornata, but it's now become a Euphorbias genus. It's so hard to keep up with all the name changes, especially when you're like in a greenhouse and you've been doing this for like years and you just like recognize the names of these plants as they are, and you just can't keep up with the name changes. But when these mature, their leaves go completely green. They have no pink veination or lines on them at all. So, you know, that to me tells me when maybe their leaves are small, maybe they have developed this kind of like patterning, sort of like a deer fawn patterning, where it's hard to actually see them in the landscape, or it sends off a patterning where it's like, hey, I've been attacked by these leaf miners, stay away, and then it actually protects the plant in case of that. Ophilandras, you could also see they have this contrasting veination. You know, maybe that's, again, it's just a hypothesis. I'm not saying that it is what it is. There could be so many other things that it means. This Peperomia flowers, never really that interesting. This one looks like it's actually has the pollen coming off of it. So this one looks a little more ready. But oftentimes when they don't have anything that's showy as far as flowers go, then that usually means that the flower is probably wind pollinated. So if I, you know, touch this and it had pollen on it, would just kind of sprinkle everywhere. These are amazing. Peperomia argyrias. I mean, that's a pretty intense, huge leaf. You could see that this almost has a bit of a peltate structure, the way that the petiole connects to the leaf. That's a thick Peperomia argyria. I'll show you some Phoetonias. This is a classic in Phoetonias. They tell you when they really need some love and attention, because they start to get like crispy edged and they just kind of collapse over the side of their containers if they don't get taken care of. Now, these have been well watered, I see, but they probably were well watered this morning, and then probably by the end of the day, they'll start to perk up and look a bit more like this. So they could take drought like a pro for a little while, but then if you do it one too many times, then they're just gonna kind of peace out on you. This one's a different kind of Peperomia that I'm not familiar with. Let's see if this one, well, this doesn't have any species names, but this is mini watermelon Peperomia. Now, is this related to Peperomia argyria? I don't really know. I think the leaf structure is completely different, as you could see. You could see that it doesn't have a peltate-shaped leaf, that the petiole comes right up to the base here and has a little bit more of a heart-shaped leaf. So even though it says mini watermelon plant, and that's a watermelon plant, this is very different. Best way, let me just show you, subtle differentiation. So you could, yes, it has that kind of watermelon coloration, but look where the petiole connects here. It's more towards the center, and the veination is completely different, right? Kind of has a spider-like veination. You can see this one, petiole connects right at the edge here and has very different variation, and of course a totally different shape of the leaf. So even though it has the same coloration of that silver and green, completely different way that the petiole attaches. This one's a beautiful plant. I find this really easy to grow. This is another kind of Peperomia. I think it's kind of Peperomia rubella, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, really thick leaves, and I love that kind of classic red under the leaf, and then you have the dark green surface. Also responds really well to cutting back. So you could see that this plant probably could be cut back, and then it would start to grow these side shoots out right here. Peperomia angulata. It reminds me of Peperomia dalstedtii. Kind of has that, again, that kind of watermelon-like look with the contrasting veination. Really beautiful plant that just like kind of cascades over. So it is more of a hanging plant. This one says Peperomia happy bean. So I'm guessing this is a Peperomia ferrare. And there are different cultivars of this plant. This one's definitely a much more robust variety, because you could kind of find ferrares that are a little like more whimsical, I think, shaped. This one feels more compact and very thick, and it does look like green beans. So I think that's kind of an appropriate name for this plant. One plant that I haven't gotten like totally along with is, and haven't really explored, is crotons. Crotons are really popular in Singapore when we were there. I mean, some of those crotons were really, really interesting. And you know, crotons, I believe, all started out green. And then there was one person who noticed that there is, you know, this kind of plant that developed these weird colorations, and they really selected for that. So crotons have become popular just for their really kind of distinct colorations that have been selected over time. And some of the species have really cool growth structures. There's one in Singapore that they called like interrupta, that the leaf was like interrupted and had this kind of extra leaf off the end of it. I don't know, it kind of looked like a nepenthes. But that's something that I haven't seen very much of ever since I got here from Singapore. I've seen some in the US, but it's not been common. Discidias, this one's called Cascade Green. You could have fooled me because there's so many different cultivars that look very similar. But again, flowers, not that really interesting, but this is in the family of Apocynaceae, which is in the same family as hoyas. Now, they don't get as many cool blooms as hoyas, but you know, I actually quite like them because again, these plants like really can fill in a space. And again, beautiful cascading plant, very hardy, very robust. You don't have to give it too much light. This is a plant that, you know, again, it has a semi-succulent nature, but like with most hoyas, you know, you go to botanic gardens and you sometimes see them in the succulent and cacti houses, and they often have this kind of yellowing to their leaves, this like general malaise, and it's usually because they need to be under some set of shade. Okay, this looks like a mangrove, but it says it's a yucca variety. I'm not sure what variety it is, and I'm not like too in the know about yuccas, but kind of cool, kind of neat. This is the different colors. It reminds me of some of the dracaenas that have like different colorways. And then of course, if you go under the bench in any of these places, you have some Tradescantias here. Got your snake plants. Got some of your alocasias over here. I mean, they definitely don't have as many alocasias as we saw at like Tully's greenhouse, but hard to compare. This is a great example of maybe something that got a little bit too much light. So this is a Maranta. You can see that it's lost a lot of its color. It should have a pretty deep green leaf, something more akin to this. So this is a plant that would probably serve better being under the bench. And yeah, what do you think about that? You look a little preggers, yeah. You look a little preggers. Hello. Hi. I love you so much. Yes. Come see the waterfall with us. I think they have a couple cats because I saw another one walking this way. Oh, look at this Anthurium. This seems new. Sempre Black. Really nice cultivar, probably off of Andrianum. This one has a little pollen, you could see. So that's fertile. So is this one. Feeling good in this room. Oh my God, look at this begonia. This is a really hard species to grow, but it seems to be doing quite well here. Typical thing with the asparagus, you can see how some of it turns brown. That's if it gets like too crispy, if it dries out. But there's a lot of like life to this as well. And you have to be careful with this because they do kind of tendril everywhere. And I had to cut mine back in my house because they have these, you can see these little spikes. See that spike? It gets caught in everything, especially your hair. And I'm always afraid that it's just gonna stab me in the eye one day. Yes, so this kind of reminds me of the Tioga Garden. This is how you get your humidity up in your house. See, these are clivias. One's about here to bloom. I think these are called farfugiums. Farfugium japonicas, I believe. I mean, these are massive. Hard to keep up a greenhouse like this, though. There's your Dracaenas here. You could see what they look like when you let them grow out and you give them some substrate to grow on. I don't know what this is. Anybody knows what this is? But it looks like it needs some type of long-tongued or long-beaked animal to pollinate it. Maybe a hummingbird? Hummingbird might be a perfect fit for this tubular flower. You have your monsteras, you have your shrimp plant over here. And I think this is a tetrastigma. Some of the new leaves coming in. Some are very furry. And then this is one of those giant, I mean, look at that giant thematophyllum, it's insane. It's pretty crazy. I mean, you could hack away half of this and it would still be a beast. Here's your Norfolk pine, your Araucaria. I think these are just directly planted in the ground. There's spleniums. This is ginormous. I mean, this is what every apartment dweller is like, oh, if I only had a little bit more space, I could give my plant, you know, this amount to grow up on. But sometimes, like, too good of a thing means like higher maintenance. So if you see like some of these monsteras, it gets a little challenging because then you have to actually crawl up there in the vents and actually cut down anything that's maybe like dead or kind of oppressed or hitting too much light. But you know, if you think about this, like you wouldn't even have to buy nursery stock in. You could just take cuttings if you're set up for it and sell those plants. This is pretty neat. To be able to come up on a second layer and look down. So this is actually the inflorescence.
And these are the colorful bracts. So the flower really doesn't have anything spectacular about it, but it's the bracts that last. It's a modified form of a leaf, a bract, a B-R-A-C-T. And this modified form of a leaf actually lasts for a long time. If you think about our euphorbias, like Euphorbia millii, those have colorful bracts, and you say, oh, those are in flower all the time. Well, actually, these bracts then signal to pollinators to say, hey, come in and pollinate. There's something good here, even though the flower itself isn't that showy. So the bracts actually do the job of calling in the insect to pollinate the plant. I just love all the coverage on here. You see how the Tradescantias just kind of like move throughout and then transition into ferns? And then you even have like a sorrel or a clover here. See that? It's like an oxalis. And some of the Araucaria, those Norfolk pines. Not in the pine family though, even though it's called a pine. A huge amount of Monstra deliciosa right here. This one's about to fruit. So you see this? These are flowers turning into fruit. So that's pretty cool to see. Look at that. Amaryllis. These always smell pretty good. Popularly sold around Christmas time for apartments for like really small Christmas trees. And then this is related to the Schlumbergeras. This one says Ripsalidopsis, but they do look different structure-wise from Schlumbergeras, which you think about Thanksgiving and Christmas cacti, for instance. A lot of these are about to bloom. Mine has been a prolific bloomer as well, so very highly hybridized, so very hard to find which one's which. I'm not sure what this flower is. I saw it actually at the checkout counter. Maybe it's a type of primula of sorts. Not really good at that. Here's that cissus again. You can see how it's vining. These ones right here are bracts. And then you have your geraniums over here. And then you have your oxalis. There's another cat. I like this plant. I had a real difficult time actually growing this in my home. I thought it would be an excellent hanging plant, but I think it actually really would enjoy a more top-down light than I was able to give it. Catalina pendens. Really nice plant. Very thick and juicy. This is cool because this is a ginormous cristate cactus of some sort. It's kind of got this monstrous version, this kind of growth structure. Actually, I think it's a euphorbia because this looks like a euphorbia lactea, so you can see it's reverting back to what its normal structure is, but this is all like monstrous version. I have a thing here, but no, that's for something else. But I think it's some type of euphorbia that has basically has this monstrous cristate kind of version. And then oftentimes if you don't want it to revert back to what it typically looks like, you can see this is a great example of what it typically would look like, then you can actually cut that off. So that's pretty neat. Some aloes about to bloom. So you can see how aloes bloom. They start to bloom from the bottom up. So some of these are spent blooms, and you'll see like the last bloom will be the topmost bloom. Some sedums. Kalanchoe. Euphorbia millii, I had mentioned this before. This is a great example. So you see these are the colorful bracts, often mistaken for petals of a flower, but it's the flower that's actually inside here. It's a little past bloom here. epiphyllums. This is pretty cool to be able to see the inside of a cactus. That's not something that you normally get to see all the time. It's actually quite woody on the inside. Old lady cactus. So you can see it looks like this fuzzy nature. Oftentimes you'd see cactus with fuzz on. Sometimes you would see them on the edges of mountains that maybe are next to the ocean. And so sometimes they'll collect this, kind of the ocean spray or a lot of fog, and they would collect that. But then this is also used to be able to reflect the sun back. So it actually protects the green parts of the plant, which is underneath this kind of like fuzzy hair right here that you see. So it could serve multiple purposes, which is quite neat. Interesting, this is another Euphorbia, Tiracoli, pencil stick cactus, but it's not a cactus and it's actually quite large, which is pretty neat to see. I wonder if like some of these are just specimen plants or if they do actually sell them. Here's a great example of a smaller one. Let's see a smaller version of this. But again, you could just like look at how prolific this plant is. You could just take cuttings for days. It's amazing. Crassulas. This is a Crassula muscosa. It's called watch chain plant. And you can actually see why. It has that kind of appeal of like a jewelry or, you know, if you will, a watch chain. Some jades. And this is kind of strange. I've never seen a poinsettia that is trained to be on a standard. So you can see it looks like actually a tree. Typically you see them as like little bushes that, you know, that you get at around Christmas time. But these are kind of grown out and trained as a standard. Clerodendrons. I haven't really seen these make a big impact in the houseplant market. I've never actually grown one myself, so I can't tell you whether, I see them in greenhouses all the time, but I just don't see them in people's homes. It's starting to smell very florally, and I think this is where all their citrus plants are. I mean, look at some of this, huge fruits. And these all smell like jasmine and lemon. It smells so beautiful. Wow. Okay, if I had a greenhouse, then I would be probably taking some of these trees with me, but I don't really love growing citrus indoors. But I think we're running out of time, so I think we're gonna wrap it up here. Pretty impressive, a massive greenhouse. You know, you can see some of it's a little hard to keep up, but you know, every day. This is why I probably Carol couldn't come and actually do a tour with us because she's like working overtime. But OTT'S greenhouse, it's in Schwenksville, PA, on our way to Philadelphia. So if you get a chance, come and see it and explore it. I can't tell you, it smells so beautiful in here right now, especially because all of these lemons and limes are in bloom. But we'll head out and we'll see you later.
Stay tuned on Plant One On Me for more botanical tours, talks, and how-tos. And if you're looking to further your knowledge on the plant kingdom, then have a look at our various online courses from Troubleshoot Your Houseplants to the Houseplant Masterclass. So check that out if that interests you. Otherwise, we'll see you in the next episode.